Hello, Rogue Ones. This is your Rogue leader, Leslie Eiler Thompson, back with another full episode of the Rogue Ones podcast, in which we talk with fascinating individuals going full-on rogue in their life journey, and we get to benefit from learning about their mistakes and successes so that we may adopt the same attitudes for our own rogue lifestyle. Today's episode features a disciplined and exquisite musician just barely at the onset of a long career in making music. It's a discussion about expectation, failure, and intention. As you listen to us catching up in the Rogue headquarters, which is to say my house, with coffees and birds chirping outside, I'm hopeful that you'll walk away feeling like you aren't alone. You aren't alone in feeling like you failed. You aren't alone in unrealized expectations, and you certainly aren't alone in your quest to make your craft your main thing. Her name is Abigail Flowers. Side note, isn't that the best artist name of all time? And you'll hear our conversation shortly. Did you know there's a rogue party happening online? Well, there is, and it's wild. If you meander your way on over to rogueonespodcast.com, you'll find a couple things. The first is an invitation to submit your email to receive information about each episode that no one else gets. I would love to have you join us there. And then there's a link to the Rogue One Spotify playlist. It's made up of songs submitted by listeners, and it's the perfect Friday morning soundtrack. Well, now let's get on with it. Meet Abby Flowers. Each other from Belmont University in the commercial voice program, which is essentially, it's like a rock star school. It's right. Like, if you want to be a rock star, like, come to this school. But talk about where are you at right now? What is your sort of feeling right now about your career? Because you've been doing the self-employed on your own thing for how long?
Like 5 months now.
5 months.
Yeah.
And how's it going? What are you feeling?
I was managing an ice cream shop for a year. I worked for Jenny's for several years and then felt like I needed an adult's income, health insurance, just felt overwhelmed. And
you worked for Jenny's just as a
part-timer,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. An ambassador.
Oh, is that what you were?
Yes, I was an ambassador and then a shift leader. And so I took a full-time job, became a manager, and quickly realized this is not for me, but I need to see it through. So I committed to a year, and I did a year, and then I just saved like crazy throughout that and thought, I'll give myself 3 months worth. So I saved up what I thought was 3 months of income and gave my notice, quit my job at the end of October, or sometime in October. And 2017. I thought that I was going to have to return to some kind of part-time work in January, and I have not had to do that. That is in large part due to the fact that my husband's income is good and is growing. I have to remind myself, like, of people who graduated from Belmont with our degree.
Yes. How
many people are still pursuing music? So few.
So few.
It is not a viable career for a lot of people.
When did you make the choice to do the career? And what is the career, in your words, that you are pursuing?
My whole life, like, music was the thing. I think my brother is a person who is, like, good at so many things, doesn't feel like this deep, aching call to one thing. And I am a person who I'm capable of many things, but there was never any question, like, music was going to be my thing. Still sorting what it is about music that I love. Mm-hmm. You can only pursue something for a lifetime if you love it, if it is intrinsically valuable to you. If no one ever gave you applause for it, what would you be doing? I don't think that I ever chose what I was going to do so much as I chose not to do other things. Like, it's a continual weeding out of certain things. For example, when I was in high school, I was a standout Spanish student, and I went to governor's school for Spanish, and the first year I took Spanish classes, I ranked nationally on the national Spanish exam. Like,
wow.
It always felt unreasonable how it felt more like remembering something than learning. Like, it just came very naturally. And so when I was applying to colleges, it was, are you going to study music at Belmont for expensive, or are you going to study Spanish at JMU for free? And music was my first choice, and so if that hadn't worked out, I might have gone the Spanish route. But I chose music over that, and various other things that maybe could have been my more practical career.
Sure. I think the idea of doing music as a career is something that not very many people think about. They think about record deal. They think about all of huge concerts in front of tons of people. They think about my CD, or my iTunes album or whatever, my Spotify. They think about the ends of what that means. But they don't think about the means to that end.
Yep.
And it truly was not something I really understood until I got a couple years into Belmont, and I started realizing, oh my heavens, like, this is a career, and any career, you have to invest, whether it be money, time, all sorts of things. And so the idea that you want to make a career out of being a jazz vocalist, correct?
Right.
Is that the terminology you've landed on?
I would not even say that I feel that is definitely at least 60% of it.
Right.
I am rediscovering my non-jazz music side. Wonderful. Too. I cannot imagine not doing jazz for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But I don't think that will be the only thing.
Why jazz? Why is that something that you never want to set aside? What is that origin?
I love the music itself. Like, it moves me, and I think that's a very subjective, like, everyone has just different things they connect with, but some things that I love are great melodies, and you find a lot of that in jazz standards. I love interesting harmony, definitely something you find in jazz.
Definitely.
And improvisation is kind of a perfect marriage of those to me. So listening to Ella Fitzgerald improvise is like magical, and hearing someone compose a fantastic melody and conforming to these rules of harmony, like, that is so engaging to me. The way that those two elements come together in improv, harmony and melody. So I think it's that's just challenging to my brain. And I have always loved the theory side of things. I love writing songs. So there's a, like, in the moment creativity to jazz when it comes to improvisation. I love that it's a common language. The fact that there's jazz jams, there's like this common canon of work that so many people are familiar with. So it's kind of like an instant connection in that way. At the same time, like, you can go a lifetime and keep learning. So I think that's a huge part, is that it feels like a world where I will spend the rest of my life learning. And that is so comforting to me, that the focus would be on lifelong learning and continual growth as opposed to making it.
Interesting. Right.
Which is so contrary to the rock star school. Know who you are.
Right.
How are you? What's your brand? What's your story? Like, 18-year-olds should not know.
Right.
Who they are. Like, that's not part of the deal.
Right.
So the culture of jazz, like, you're allowed to get old as a jazz artist.
Which I adore.
Yeah, and like you see that in country. There are other places where you're allowed to age. But in pop music, I once had a mentor tell me, as a woman, you have until 30 to build a fan base. And you can continue to perform after that, but you won't be growing a fan base after 30.
My whole life I have felt that there is a block of my existence that is going to be just completely void from when I start to have kids till when they're old enough to go to school. Like, I don't dream up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it looks like. Even before I was dating anybody seriously,
yeah,
I could dream up until I have kids, and then it's like, I don't know what happens after
I disappear.
that. It's been wonderful to see women that are not doing that and that are pressing forward. But in the world of music as a marketing, a vehicle for marketing, there's some truth to that.
Sure.
But should we continue to perpetuate it? And
right.
should we say, just be, this is how it's going to be? Or should we say, this was what was in my case, and I hope it's not like that for you?
I have been damaged by people leaning too far toward, here's the way it's going to be.
Right.
The biggest example of that is when I was at Belmont, and a certain professor every semester says to his lower seminar class, if you are a female vocalist, you are the dumbest person in the room until proven otherwise. It's worse if you're pretty. It's worse if you're blonde. And I get that has been his experience. Like, he maybe feels like he's just shining a light on sexism or something. But when he does that in a way that shames a young woman, he always makes an example of someone. At the same time, I do think there's a lot of value in hearing someone's story of what they've put up with.
Right.
But I think probably I want to hear that from women who have been through it and persevered through that. I had a male friend who I felt was a very comparable musician who had the highest scholarship the School of Music gives. And I got all of my scholarship was academic. None of it was musical.
Interesting.
And that was an automatic, I think they did that to incentivize getting more men in the program because it was such a female-heavy.
Yeah.
But to me that felt like, what does that say about my skill level? I automatically felt like, oh, he must be so much smarter than me.
So I think this brings up an interesting point is the idea of failure in our... In a field like this, in a music field like this, I don't think people hear enough where the failures are, or they think that if someone isn't big, then they're just not good. When I came to Belmont, it was like some showcase weekend, and I remember sitting in the crowd with my mom, and my eyes were like lit up, and it was like, I'm gonna do that one day, and then it doesn't happen. And so that idea of failure, not doing what you think you are going to do, how have you seen that play out in your lifetime?
I have had a very interesting mix of success and failure to where I feel like acutely aware of how the things that maybe felt like a letdown to me or whatever, like how someone else would have really wanted that. And so I think a lot of moments that might have felt like failure at the time, I'm like, well, I need to be grateful for that because someone else would have loved to have that. And that's healthy, but I have to kind of think about, like, in the moment what felt like failure. And definitely one of the big things is like commercial showcase or any of the other showcases, or there was one ensemble that was like supposed to be, all the best singers. And so I thought all right, my sophomore year, I'll get into this ensemble, and the next year I'll get into the next best one, and then senior year, I'll be in the quote-unquote best one. And that'll be validation, you know. And that ensemble was very much marked by big voices that could sing really high, and I never developed that type of voice, partially because halfway through college I had a tonsillectomy.
Did it change your instrument?
So
did you feel
much.
It change?
I am currently still relearning to sing.
Really?
Because I didn't relearn. So
interesting.
Yeah, my chest voice and my low range is underdeveloped for my age. But in high school, I was the big voice, and I had more vocal flexibility. I could do runs, or like, you're going to be a gospel singer, which is fully laughable now. But at the time, that was all the feedback that I got.
Really?
I was Dorothy in The Wiz. I got invited to perform at Amateur Night at the Apollo because I sang...
What?
Like, on a tour of the Apollo Theater, I sang Home from The Wiz.
Sure.
Because that was part of the tours. You get to do a little talent show.
Oh, do you
And
really?
the guy pulled me aside and said, give me your contact info. Would love to have you do this. You might get booed, but...
You might get booed?
Well, that's
He literally
the thing.
said that?
Yeah, that's the thing about Amateur Night at the Apollo, is that they're a ruthless audience.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
That's almost really fun.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole thing.
Did
is
you
like,
get booed?
I did not do it.
Oh.
I talked to my parents, and it was just like, so you're pretty sensitive. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't do that.
That's sweet.
No, so I had a very different voice then. So then they chopped out half my throat. Your body is your instrument. So
Well,
any
the
trauma
space is
to
changing.
completely, and who knows how different things in there were affected. Anyway, point is, it changed the sound of my voice a lot.
Goodness.
So it kind of like changed my whole musical trajectory, and like who could I listen to and hear my vocal tone. It was not any longer like the big belt voice.
Could you hear that as you were singing, or was it in recordings that you
Oh,
suddenly...
no, it was everything.
Everything.
In my head, it was like a shocking change from the get-go. My voice got a lot higher, too, like...
Speaking or just singing?
Speaking, yeah. Oh, I sounded like a little baby child. I'm sure I do now, but I'm used to it. It's been 6 or 7 years.
How old were you when that happened? At what point were you in the...
I had just turned 20, maybe?
So you were in the middle of school.
I was in the middle. So I got tonsillitis right before I started my first semester of private commercial voice lessons.
Wow.
So that definitely felt like failure, I'm
it felt like
sure.
failure.
I didn't get to sound like myself.
When you put a lot of your identity in your voice, which we do whether or not we want to or not, it just happens, and it changes. I think about my husband, who was a guitarist and got tendinitis and had to drop the program.
And that affects you psychologically so much, and the body and mind, like, snowball.
Yeah, you are very intense about your practicing, and I love that, because there was a time where I was like, I'm a singer. I need to be practicing every day, la, 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 and that fell apart very quickly. But you have made a habit of it. Can you talk us through, like, do you have a routine?
I did not in college. I am rigid about my practice now because for several reasons. One is that my voice teacher has given me a very practical set of exercises, and it feels very much like a gym routine.
Okay.
Here's your workout. It's so like scientific and methodical. You do these exercises at this speed in this order from this note to this note. And so it is very methodical. It's so concrete compared to my recollection of training at Belmont, which did not feel like there was, a list of 3 things I could practice every day and then see results from it.
Right.
Right. At least not on the vocal side. With theory, with history, like with any of the more like, I don't know, intellectual side of it, there were concrete things that could be done. And maybe that's why I really clung to that side of things. But so now I have something I can do, and there's like a set of exercises, and then you repeat it with a little bit wider range. And so I can do the first set of exercises in 10 minutes, or I can do it for a half hour, and I can just, based on how I'm feeling vocally or whatever. So there's that. That's kind of the foundation of it. And the fact that I have seen measurable growth in my voice is like super motivation. So then on top of that, I take classes at the jazz workshop, and there are songs to learn, which again feels concrete. The goal is to learn this song.
Right.
And, you know, you pick things up in the process. Like, the more songs you learn, the more you're soaking up that vocabulary. And the next time you learn a song, you're going to be, 0.5% more ready to absorb that information quickly. Improvisation is another thing that I'm working on personally. And so that also feels kind of like mathematical to me. Okay, here's the chord that you're singing over.
Right.
And so here's the palette of notes you can choose from.
Right.
But then 4 beats later, you're going to have a different palette available to you, and you really want to hit the note that is, like, different.
When a guitarist, for example, looks at the chords on their chart,
right,
they have done so much work at that point to know the scale, know what notes are involved with each chord.
Yeah. I think that's huge, and I have a friend at the workshop who's a flautist and is working on saxophone, but is about the same age, or my voice teacher is a saxophonist and vocalist. And so we'll talk about the different ways that improvisation, or even just like theory in general, how do we approach teaching that to vocalists? How do we approach teaching that to instrumentalists? And there is such a huge gap, as in my experience, in how vocalists are taught and how instrumentalists are taught. And there's also the fundamental difference that most instruments, all instruments, I don't know, they are external.
Right.
Your voice is the only internal instrument.
Right. That's
so
right.
you can't point to a C on your voice.
No.
You can't see the shape. And that's something that I love about playing ukulele, is that I can see the shape a different chord makes in my hand. And there's something, that's why I loved solfege with choir. Like, there's a physical aspect to what you're singing.
Yes.
But I also think that great instrumentalists have to find a balance between ear and muscle memory. So it's not just a physical thing, but when you hear a certain chord or series of chords, it triggers more as like an ear-related intuitive thing. Here's the melody I want to make, and it's not. There is a stage where it's very, you're thinking hard about it, and then there's a stage where you've practiced enough to trust your hands to kind of like do the right thing.
Exactly. On the subject of experiences and maybe what's next for you,
I do not feel like I have a concrete goal. Other than I want to make a living as a musician, I will say.
And I love that you say that. You don't say, I'm going to get rich. You don't say, I'm going to get famous. You say, I'm going to make a living, which means you can define that however you need to.
Yeah. That's very much where I'm at. And it's what my husband is doing. So that...
He's a
bassist. Yes. And he does classical sessions. He played on a My Little Pony movie. He also played on Call of Duty soundtrack. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
He played on The Last Witch Hunter, starring Vin Diesel and Frodo Baggins. He's a 90-year-old man in classical settings, and he's a 13-year-old boy in safer zones. I do not feel like I have a very clear picture of what my career should look like. I think I know what would feel like failure to me, or what would feel like giving up. My sweet grandmother, well, you could always teach And it's like, teaching is not a fallback. Teaching is like, if you were created to mold minds, like, you do that. I don't know. Sometimes, like, well-meaning people outside of music will be like, you know, and maybe down the line, your career looks like this. And it's like, please stop giving me ways that I could give up.
Yes,
like,
right.
So I know things that don't feel like a step forward for me and for how I was made to interact with the world. But I know, so basically my feeling right now is I have an overwhelming sense that, like, the path I'm on is okay, and I have a, like, great sense of hope that it is going to grow. Like, I'm not afraid that something terrible is going to happen and I'm going to have to get a full-time job that I hate and then accidentally get pregnant before I want to and then not be able to pursue my dreams. Like, I have a great sense of hope that music is not going to be ripped away from me, which I think has been a great fear and anxiety for a lot of my pseudo-adult life.
As a wrap-up, I think the idea of choosing a career, not because you were given a record deal or because you have a publishing deal, but simply on your own accord saying, no, I do want to be this vocalist, is a very courageous thing. But you've had to do a lot of unpacking. That isn't an easy choice for you. That is not a choice that you just, you know, maybe it was easy in that it's just what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But you've also had to do a lot of reckoning with.
The choice was just to keep going.
There's the actress on Orange is the New Black. Do you know how to say her name?
Uzo Aduba.
Thank you. And I feel really bad because she, like, said to her mom, there's this story
if you can learn to say Tchaikovsky, you can learn my name.
That's right. And I still haven't learned it, so I feel terrible. Sorry if you ever hear this.
I'm sorry if I said it wrong, but we're close.
We're close. But she won some award, and she said to all of you who see this and who are standing in line, don't get out of line, stay in line. And with creative work like this, like the singing, with acting, the whole point is that you just stay in it. You just stay in it. Because the people who leave are the ones that never, you know, they never get the opportunities.
You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Thank you, Wayne Gretzky, by way of
Michael
Scott.
Mostly Michael Scott, though.
Mostly Michael Scott. Well, Abby, thank you so much for joining me on the Rogue Ones podcast. I'm so grateful to have you. I'm going to put her Instagram handle in the description, so make sure you follow her because you're not afraid to show when you have a tricky line in a song.
The process.
The process.
Yeah, bro.
I love it. So follow her on Instagram and stay up to date with what she's doing. A true rogue. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, Abigail Flowers. She is actually spending the next month on Mackinac Island in Michigan. I think that just sounds wonderful, especially for those of us who are in humid climates this spring and summer. Thank you to Abby for joining me. Thank you to Ryan Swinehart of Sick Island Studios here in Nashville for mixing and mastering this audio you are hearing. And thank you to you for joining in for another edition of the Rogue Ones podcast. Share it with your friends if you're into it, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Have a good one, my friend. We'll talk soon.